Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Conversations in Community. I've been looking forward to this particular conversation for a while. It is with Kari Davis, and we're talking about people of color and representation in the workplace, specifically leadership roles. And the reason why I wanted to bring in Kari is that she is the Senior Director at the YMCA of the North. She's got 30 plus years of community involvement, engagement, human resources expert, coach, and apparently I'm learning really good head football coach.
Defensive coordinator.
Okay, well, I mean, we all know defense wins championships, right?
Well, exactly, yes.
Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start with the first setup question, which is, what are you seeing or not seeing when it comes to representation of people in color in the workplace and in leadership roles as well?
I've been working in the nonprofit industry for a while now, and having spent some time on the other side of that in good old corporate America. One of the things that has always been lacking is there are not a lot of people that look like me in leadership positions. And I think there are a lot of variables that add to that. One is experience, one is opportunity, and the third, I think, is just giving people a chance to excel in positions that they've never done before. Organizations not willing to take a chance and developing and training these folks for fear of them failing or not being able to do the job. And I think particularly now in this day and time that we need to be risk takers. I've always said when I'm speaking that if I actually had experience for every job I did, I'd be, the NFL commissioner like I really wanted to be. But I don't. But I'm very good at selling myself. And I think training around interviewing and about selling yourself, but also interviewing the organization or company that you're going after. So it's not so one-sided in an interview process. And I think for people of color, because when they're being interviewed, too many times the person asking the questions don't look like them. And so there's a trust issue there, there's a anxiety issue there that prevents them from being, in many cases, their authentic selves. And being able to pull from the community that reflects who you are takes work, and you have to be deliberate about it. Being at an organization like the YMCA of the North, when you look at our team members and those of us in leadership, it's sad to say that people that look like me, you can count on one hand. And particularly senior level management, that means, CEO, COO, they don't look like me either. And we've talked about that, and we've talked about how you have to create avenues for people to feel equipped to even apply for these positions, but provide them the support that they need to be successful.
And you kind of touched on this as far as, someone who goes in and interviews, but doesn't see anyone who looks like him or her and the trust. Talk about the impacts of not having more people of color in roles in not only just a business world of the outfacer of the people that you're serving, but also the people within the company who are doing the work.
It comes down to building relationships and communication. And when there's such a huge disparity of BIPOC people in leadership positions, there tends to be this invisible barrier that team members who are looking to advance in their careers put up there because they don't see people that look like them. So I feel personally it's the responsibility of leadership to reach back and to mentor and to have one-on-one conversations or group conversations or coaching or mentoring that goes on that gives anybody who is looking to be a leader in the organization the tools they need to not only have enough um, tools at their hands to apply for these positions, but be able to talk about why they would be excellent in that spot. When I worked at United Way, and I was director of diversity there, one of the things that was disappointing to me was that when the position was first created, I reported to the COO. Well, once we had a leadership change, they were restructuring where diversity was going to be. And I said very plainly, do not put it in HR. You put it in HR, that's where diversity goes to die. Because when you're in human resources, you get inundated with things that take you away from what I feel is the specific core of your work, and that is engaging others to be inclusive of the entire workplace and help them see where opportunities are. But when they bury diversity in HR, you got a lot of paperwork that you're doing, and then you lose that engagement piece that I think it's necessary. Plus, you lose the support of senior leaders to make sure that diversity is not just a core value, but something that they outwardly support and work hand in hand with. I think anyone working in a diversity area should be working hand in hand with the CEO so that when team members see postings that are there, they have a direct contact to someone that they can sit down and talk to that can help shepherd them along the way.
That's interesting because I think that me personally shows my blind spots, because you think, well, human resources, okay, that makes sense why they would do that. But what I'm hearing from you is these are two different things. I mean,
Yeah.
and they're two big things that if you try to do them together, you're just going to muddy the waters.
Yeah, you get lost in that. And when you think about D&I, diversity and inclusion, within an organization, not only should it be a core value, but it should be something that engages the entire organization. It becomes a culture shift. And if you put it in HR, it gets mired in this mud of, okay, how does this job description look? Well, job descriptions are job descriptions. You are hiring the individual who you feel is a good fit for this role. And there are things that they bring to the table that may not be in the job description, but you find are value adds to the role that you're looking for them to do. So for me, job descriptions are a template. You've got to get to know the person, what moves them, what their experiences are, and how all of that plays into this new role or promotion of a role for them can be synergized with their experience that they're bringing to the table.
And what I'm hearing you saying, this isn't something that you check off a box. This
No,
has to be a top-down cultural shift for it to be successful.
absolutely. And many times when diversity and inclusion is in the castle of HR, you are relegated to do training. Well, they take a training on implicit bias and they're like, yep, I'm good. I am now aware of diversity and that's it. And the diversity and inclusion individual not only has to bring HR along, they have to bring senior leadership along. They have to change the culture. So they need to be visible and they need to hold people accountable. And without that accountability, it is just checking boxes. And, organizations say, wow, we got a diversity leader. Yeah, where are they? Who are they engaging with? Are they out in the community? Are they connecting with people in the community? Are they sharing about the mission and vision of the organization with people who might see themselves in that organization, but only read what's on the job listings or the job board? And, they go in with, what can I say? What can I say? Is this going to hurt me or not?
Mm-hmm.
I make it a point when I'm either interviewing someone or when I interview that I talk about strengths and weaknesses. We're not all perfect in this. And I think when you put an HR label over diversity and inclusion, you really are checking off a list, and you are losing the opportunity to get to know the individual, because their life experiences do have value to the roles that they play in any organization.
What's it like for you at an organization where you look around and you see yourself as being the only person who looks like you, or maybe one other person? I mean, what's that like for you?
Well, I'm from Jersey, so this whole state has been a different experience for me. Um, I think I'm one of the lucky ones, because having that experience of being an East Coast person, I'm not exactly shy when I go into a workplace or I go into the meeting rooms. Um, I had an experience when I first moved here where I had to speak up in a community that was way north of us. I won't say their name,
Mm-hmm.
but I walked in with my sponsor who brought me here to Minnesota, and they had spoken to me prior to going up there. And Kari Davis is kind of a common name here in Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
so they were under the impression that I was white. And so when I walked in, there was a silence in the room. Now, I could have taken that two ways, but because I tend to be, I'm not going to say really snarky, but snarky, I used that to my advantage in my speech, because I got up to the podium and people started to leave. So I just made a comment that, well, if you're going, don't touch my car, because I see you and I'll come and find you. And my sponsors are like, oh God, there she goes. And I'm like,
there's,
I'm just kidding.
there's the Jersey.
You go, but you don't know who I know. I'm just saying. Um, so I don't see it as an intimidation factor. And I think that works well to my advantage. But not everyone comes from that same space.
Yeah.
I have walked into many meeting rooms where I'm the only one. And frankly, that doesn't bother me. What does concern me, however, is that when I am the only one, my white colleagues in the room want to paint every Black person like me. And so they meet me and they're like, well, everybody that's Black got to be like her. And I'm like, oh, child, nope, nope. I'm a different and unique person.
Mm.
And yeah, you're not going to find that with everyone. And so getting to know me on a personal level, which is why I share a lot about my experience, I'm trying to push the envelope and frankly make them a little uncomfortable, because while I feel fine when I walk into a room of people that don't look like me, that does not stop me from being myself. But it does stop people who are trying to present an image that they feel is acceptable to the majority. And as my good friend Pastor Jeff says, I don't really care what people think about me, because what you see is what you get. I am good at what I do. I am professional. I will treat you with respect as long as you treat me with respect. And when that goes awry, then we're going to have a different conversation.
That's great. That's speaking of which, I think I think I mispronounced your name then off the top. I think I said
You
Kari.
said Kari, which is a
So
Minnesotan thing,
it is
and
such
it's
a Minnesota.
Carrie.
I'm so sorry. When you said Kari, it's like, oh crap. I'm
It's
sorry.
fine. I
Well,
answered both.
I'll reshoot that part
Okay.
at the beginning, because we got to get your name right. I got to get your name right. Um, that Do you see that you talked about how you feel like where you come from, that's just who you are. That's how you enter a room. That's who you, but for
Mhm.
those who may not have that background, um, that I can imagine can be
It's
deflating.
intimidating.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's where the coaching and the mentoring comes in. I wouldn't be where I am without the mentoring I've had. There it's like that diamond in a rough. I mean, I had rough edges all over the place, but I was very smart in identifying those folks to come into my life and asking them to be my mentor, to teach me how to navigate, waters that I've never been in. And each of them, whether they were white or black, always told me, go in and own the room. And because a piece of my personality comes out that way. And so I've always gone in not nervous, not feeling that, I'm intimidated by who's in front of me, but I get to stand front and center. And now you have to listen to me. So, unlike folks that don't like to public speak, give me a microphone and I'll talk to you for 5 hours. I don't have a problem with that. I'm a storyteller. I like to use humor, but I'm very comfortable and confident in who I am. And I think that is a value add for me. And I want to coach people on how to do that. And so, again, not being mired in HR, but where I work, I worked at a youth organization where I was the chief administrative officer, and part of my role was coaching directors to go in, be sure what you have, know your information, do your research, know who's in the room, and because they're looking to you to get information. You own it, this is your time, go in and hit it out the park. If not, just engage in a conversation because that's really all it is.
Hmm. It's interesting, in preparing for this, I read some articles, and I was reading one article from an author who's a person of color who, much like your role, is a leader, has a ton of experience, but she found herself being really the only person of color in her organization. And she was constantly asked not just to do her job, but to
Mhm.
kind of be the person to figure out this whole race thing
Oh yeah,
and
the expert
inclusion.
black person.
Yeah.
I get that.
And
Oh,
my question was, is that something that you experience, and does it I would imagine it's like a whole nother role, really. I mean,
it is, and it's a burden, I will tell you. And while I haven't experienced that on the professional front, excuse me.
bless you.
Um, what I did experience is when we first moved here, and my son was a second grader at Gideon Pond in Burnsville, and being the kind of parent that I am, February 1st, I walked into the school and I walked into his classroom because the day before my son was saying he hates February. And I said, why? Because it's Black History Month and I'm the only one in the classroom. And this happened last year. And they're all going to look for me to answer questions. And he's a second grader.
Oh
So I
my.
said, okay, I'll go to school with you tomorrow. I can handle this. So I walked in and I pulled his second grade teacher aside and I said, he really enjoys your class. I'm going to ask you a favor. I know today starts the beginning of Black History Month, even though it shouldn't be just a month, but I'll leave that alone. Um, but if you would, when you're talking about this, if you can engage everyone and not just use my son as an example, because he represents himself and his family, not the entire Black population, because he's in second grade. Okay. Now, if you want someone to come in and talk about Black history, I'll volunteer to do that, but please don't use my son. And she's like, oh, I totally understand. So I'm leaving and I see him. I said, now, honey, what I want you to do is be polite And if a question comes to you, just say, I, I represent me and my family. Don't say what your mama would say. Okay. Just be respectful and be nice. I think I was home for an hour and I got a call from the principal. Mrs. Davis, can you come to school? Your son is sitting in the principal's office. And I'm like, oh no. So I got there and he's sitting there with this smirk on his face. I'm like, what did you do? Well, they asked me what it was like being black in America. He's like, what do I know? I'm in second grade. If my mother heard that, she'd be really upset. And so I kind of got into an argument with somebody in class, and I'm like, I told you to be respectful, respectable. So, but it's something that was ingrained in me as a child. And so I ingrained it in my son. And that's where I knew, and again, I think I was here 2 years at that point, where I knew I had to come at it differently.
Mm.
I had to raise my son in a way that made him aware of his surroundings. And frankly, his friends, who are his brothers, who are still his friends to this day, and they're all married, they have children and dogs and houses and, you know, benefits. I remember talking to them in middle school and in high school. I said, listen, my son is the only black kid in your group. If anything shakes down and you all go running, the person they're going to go after is not you, but him. And I need to know that you all are aware of that. And they would get so frustrated with me. They're like, ah, what are you talking about? He's with us, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, I get what you're saying. He's your brother, but he's also a black boy. And such is the way of our world. They're going to look at him first before they start asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk a lot to community, and we talk a lot about this in the workplace because we work in community, it's always about having the talk. And for us, the talk is about how to be black in a majority white area and survive it. And to this day, I mean, my son is 34, and I still am awake at nights when he goes out with his family. And my daughter in law is white, and she's beautiful, and I love her, and my grandsons are, mixed. But I worry about them because of how the world perceives us. And when my son goes in for a job interview, he sits down and I do a lot of coaching with him, and he's gotten really good at navigating not just himself, but being very proud of where he came from, the education he received, and just being able to sell himself. And that is so important when you are interviewing or you want to pull from the BIPOC community to be proud of who you are, to have that coaching and to go in and have the confidence to say, you need me here, and this is the reason why.
And to that end, what do you coach him, or what do you coach others like him? What tips do you have?
One, do your homework. Know a lot about the company you're going in to speak with. Get names of who's going to be in the room. Who are you interviewing with? Sometimes it's just one person. Go online to the job site, Google their name, look at their resume or their vitae, or just their profile that they have on the job site, so that you can ask questions that they're familiar with. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't be afraid to share about your experiences, the good and the bad, as long as it's relative to what's being asked of you. And listen, 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 listen. Don't have prepared answers going in where you're not hearing a question, but you turn it into a conversation, so that that fear factor of I got to get all these answers right turn into, we're just two people talking, and I'm going to share with you why I'm the best person for this role.
I just thought of this question when you talked about Kari Davis and people see you on the paper, but then when you came in person up north, have you ever had that experience in the job interview or where you can't even get past the, or have heard people you've coached that can't even get past the front door?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, unfortunately, we live in an imperfect world. Um, One of the things that I've grown up with, even back in Jersey, people would accuse me of talking white. And my son got here, and one of his buddies said, "How come you don't talk like the other black kids in our school?" Now, he could have had a lot of different responses to that, but what he said was, "You have met my mother, right? If I don't talk uh, articulately, she would have my head." He goes, "I speak proper English because that's how she speaks to me. That's how I was raised. And that's just how I speak." They're like, "No, but seriously, you don't talk like the other black kids in our school." Now, they're down in my family room. I'm up in the kitchen. So I came downstairs and the other guys are like, "Uh-oh, here she comes." And I'm like, "Darling, let me explain something to you." When I worked for a retail company, and this was Macy's back in New York, and they would always give me the college students to talk to hire for seasonal work. And I shared this story with them. I said, one of them came in. He looked like he just rolled out of bed, young African American male. He had his pants down almost to his knees. He had this wrinkly shirt on. His hair was all catawampus. And I looked at him, and he was, I mean, there were a line of chairs out my office because we were definitely getting a lot of people in. And I walked down the line and I looked at him and said, "Come with me." And he just looked at me and goes, "Well, it's not my turn." I'm like, "Oh, it's your turn. Come with me." And I brought him into my office and I shut the door. And he was visibly nervous. I said, "Okay, take a breath." And he did. And I said, "Does your mother know you left the house looking like this?" And he's like, "You can't talk to me like this." I'm like, "Oh, sonny boy, let me tell you something. I'm a black mother. Yes, I can. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to go home. You're either going to put your hair in a ponytail or whatever you need to do. You're going to pull up your pants, find a belt, and put on a shirt with a tie, and then you can come back." "Well, I don't need this job." And I'm like, "You're right, you don't. And I don't need to hire you. But if you want to get hired here, you have to go through me. And who you are is how you show up in front of me. So if you want to at least speak to me, you will present yourself quite differently." I said, "Now get out and I'll see you in an hour." And he walked out of there huffing and puffing. And rah, rah, rah. So I went through the interviews that afternoon, and the last one was this young man. And I said, "Ah, you came back." And he had his head down. I'm like, "Coming to my office." I'm like, "Okay, now that I don't have to figure out who you are, tell me who you are." And we had this great conversation. He wound up working for the particular store that I hired him for all through college, and then went into our management training program. He was bright. He was engaging. He had all of these different ideas about what he can do, but people don't see past the physical. And so we have to be aware of that. And particularly, and I hate to say it, but it's so true, when you are a BIPOC person, the first thing they see is your skin color. So you want to be able to get them past that by being able to present yourself in a way where they can't use that as an excuse. While many still do, don't let that be a reason that they use.
Great. Those are tips you were talking about what people can do. What about who are interviewing? What about the hiring folks? What should they be thinking about when it comes to this issue?
This is why diversity can't be hidden in HR. We have to be at the same table, that is having conversations about what the organization needs. What are they looking for? What is this going to represent? What is the long-term effect of this role within the organization? How will it be supported? Who's going to be on the team with them? And here's what is needed to help a person grow within that role. If we're not at that table, if we're only getting it after the job descriptions are done, after the vetting has been done to interview people, we've already lost ground on that. We have to be sitting with the chief of HR, the CEO, the director of HR to provide our input about this is what you will see in this community. And if you're looking for this person to come in to engage with a particular community, you might want to pay attention to opportunities that you might have to hire someone from that community. If they don't check all the boxes, where are their teachable moments? Where can they be trained? And overall, would they be a great fit and represent the face of the organization you want the community to see? Now, does it always have to be a BIPOC person? No. You want to hire the best, but you at least want to give them a chance to have that opportunity to interview for that role.
That's great. I mean, because obviously at the end of the day, we all have blind spots. And if you have the same people with the same blind spots in the same room, you can predict what's going to happen.
Exactly. And holding them accountable so that when they get to the final three candidates, you ask the tough questions, do they represent the community? Do they look like the community? How are they different from the team that's already in place? And if they are progressive enough to hire someone different, how are you preparing the team? Because that is another piece, particularly around culture. If you have an all-white team that is not used to a person of color being either a leader in that team or even being a part of that team, there's some serious training that needs to happen. And there's a lot of implicit bias that happens because people don't say it, but you can see it in how they look at a person, their body language, questions that they don't ask, or responses that they do give that are, and this is a non-professional word, shady. And of course, the new person is not going to bring that out, but it's up to the director, the manager, whoever is the leader that is supervising the team to bring that out. They need to know what to look for. And if they're having trouble with that, that's when they can go to the head of diversity, the director of diversity, to sit down and ask those questions and not feel that they're lacking in anything, but they want to learn and they're interested in knowing. Without those direct lines of communication, you're not going to get rid of the implicit bias. You're going to fall back on, this is what's comfortable, and so this is what I'm going to do.
And last couple of questions, and you talked about the team. So then someone like myself, I don't hire people. I'm not at that table, but I'm assuming there's got to be things that I can do to help with this issue. What would some things that you would advise me to do?
Particularly now, as we see a lot of people coming together for social justice, one of the things that I keep saying is that we've heard all the platitudes, we've heard all the talk, we're so sorry, blah, blah, blah. We need to see action. And from our white allies, not only stand with us, but do something, because you have the privilege to get into doors that maybe I can't, and to speak on behalf of the BIPOC community and talk about why you care about it and why they should care about it. You have an amazing platform, being in the media and being able to use this platform to not only share that message of trying to destroy institutional racism, but to bring people of color to the table to have these types of conversations. And I think the more that the majority, our allies, and others get to see that, then that shock of, oh, I do need to be doing more, and not just putting a Black Lives Matter sign on their lawn, but really being engaged and raising those questions. When they look around the room and everybody looks like the majority, ask the question, where's the representation? Why isn't this community represented? What do we need to do to address that? Because that's a problem. We don't live in a whitewashed world, and where white folks have the privilege, they also have the opportunity, and they are at the table where they need to bring us and stand with us and support us. That's the kind of action I want to see, in addition to the financial support that we need to not just hire a BIPOC person and pay them at the lowest rung of the salary, but to say, you know what, your experience means something. And because of your experience and the value add and the expertise you bring, you need to be looked at as your colleagues who are doing the same work and pay them accordingly. We've got a lot of work to do financially in organizations to have equitable pay, not just with BIPOC people, but with women. And that's a story for another day, because I can talk 3 hours about that.
And when you say BIPOC, what does that stand for?
BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, People of Color.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess the last question I have, and then if there's anything else that you want to talk about that we missed, but you talked about the platitudes. You've been doing this a long time, so I'm sure you've seen the ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
Do you feel this moment is different? Are you skeptical? Why? How would you categorize this moment that we're in right now when it comes to this topic?
There's a sense that I feel this is different. And it's different because I've seen so many people who don't look like me standing side by side. There's hope there for me. There's also hope that younger people are standing front and center, that us old folks have made a mess of things. And so they're now organizing and trying to fix what we messed up so many years ago and to this day. And my prayer is that because of that, and because of the young voices and the activists that are out there, and for them to stand their ground and to separate themselves from the violence and the destruction that is going, and to wrap themselves around the peaceful protesting that is happening, and not being afraid to address that front and center, there's just something in me that sees this moment differently. Will it change overnight? No. I always use this phrase, you can't boil the ocean, but each step we take that moves us forward is better than a step that takes us backwards.
Great. Oh, the other question, I didn't know if this had any relevance or not, but with the COVID era right now, has that had any impacts on this efforts of getting more people of color in leadership roles?
COVID has put a strain on the employment opportunities that are out there, be it people of color or anyone. Mm-hmm. And it was hard before for people of color. It's tougher now because there are so many people who are now in the same position as being unemployed and trying to get back into the workplace. And what COVID has done is not made it a equal playing field, because again, the privilege that goes along with being a white person stands front and center. Now a BIPOC person has to compete against that and trying to get an interview and trying to get in a door, knowing that before COVID, maybe there were 5 people standing in front of you. Now you got 30. And so it doesn't make it easier. That doesn't mean they're not hiring people of color, because they are, but it makes it tougher.
Yeah. Those are the questions I had. Anything that I'm missing that you think, oh man, we should have talked about this, or he should have asked that?
Well, I'm interested to know in what you see, as a media person, do you think that the media is covering this differently? And what are things, if you were directing this, what
Mhm.
would you like to see more in terms of kind of equal time with
Mhm.
people who are out there?
Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that, especially here in the Twin Cities and Minnesota, media has always struggled with is representation. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
on air and people behind the scenes as well, but especially front facing on air people who look like the people we serve.
Yeah.
That's always been an Achilles heel for us. Some we go in flows where it gets a little better, but then it digresses. And I don't, part of me, the reason why I wanted to do this is because I haven't been as active as I think I could have been in
Mm-hmm.
voicing my thoughts on why is this not happening. Um, so I think that's the place, the most obvious place right now that
Mm-hmm.
we could do better at is having people that at the table that look like us. I mean, I still remember conversations that I would have with my Black colleagues, and we're around the table of talking about, hey, what we're going to do today. What are some stories we're talking about? And they're the only one who look like themselves at the table, and
Mm-hmm.
and hearing them afterwards feeling kind of exhausted day in and day out of have to be that voice
Yeah.
to say,
Yeah.
wait a second, I
Mm-hmm.
think we're missing something here.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's, like you said, it's the same thing you talked about. It's the burden.
Yes.
That burden is just adds so much more to a job that's already stressful. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. And you get to a point where you're tired of teaching white people how to treat you.
mm-hmm,
And it does get exhausting. And, these last few months with everything that's been going on, I have sat on more committees and more coalitions. And it's like my story hasn't changed.
yeah,
Action needs to change.
yeah.
Why do you think that is? And, I don't know if it's just Minnesota, is it the Midwest, but why do you think that is? And it's not like there are people that are not out there. They
Mm-hmm,
are.
yeah. I, you know, I think part of it is it's hard work.
Yeah.
It can be uncomfortable hard
Mhm.
work. That's
Mhm.
and I can speak for myself
Right.
and people I know.
Right.
Confrontation is not something that people like in the state of Minnesota.
Is that
And
that Minnesota nice that
yeah,
everybody
I
talks
mean, it's
about?
like, exactly. And for me personally, I mean, as a reporter, I kind of learned how to do that confrontation thing because that was part of my job. Um,
Mhm.
but it wasn't, I, I, uncomfortableness is a space that is uncomfortable. And in these, I think in these conversations that we have about race, about representation, about just treating people with kindness and respect,
Mhm.
when you get into what I'm learning, and I'm still learning, when you
Mhm.
get into these really tough conversations, you get
Mhm.
into some very uncomfortable truths of,
Mhm.
hmm, what have I done?
Mhm.
What, or the lack of what I mean, for me personally, it's like I used to be able to say when stuff like whatever would happen in the community, I would say, well, I can now I can push more on telling stories. That's what I can do.
Mhm.
That might be good, but I think I've discovered that I think I was lying to myself
Mhm.
because maybe I did a good job that one day, but I would then go home and what in my personal life
Mhm.
have I done?
Mhm.
They were half, to me, I look back, it's like they're half measures.
Mhm.
And and we're kind of getting a little off topic as far as job,
Sure.
but to me, it all kind of relates right now is like, I've had the mirror on me and it's
Mm-hmm.
been uncomfortable, and it's going to continue to be uncomfortable. And I think that one of the ways for folks like me to solve this is to
Mm-hmm.
be okay in that space and
Right.
to keep pushing and pressing forward, because it's like you said, it's not going to be something that is solved
Oh,
tomorrow or the
yeah.
next month or the month after that.
Well, and it's also about changing mindset. You used an interesting word, the confrontation. And
Hmm.
I think for a lot of my white colleagues, they go in it with that mindset that this is going to be a confrontation. It may be a difficult conversation, but there doesn't have confrontation just sounds so negative.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a different conversation. And there might be answers that you are uncomfortable with. It's okay. It's okay to be uncomfortable. And trust me, I've been in enough meetings where, I'll say things and I got all, eyes on me because I said it. Does that make me uncomfortable? Yeah. Does my guard go up? Yeah, but do I stay quiet? No, not so much. And
Hmm.
so not being afraid to have the difficult conversations and being able to take some of that negativity away, because at the end of the day, we're all on the same team here.
Hmm.
And we're all trying to get to that finish line uh, as a team and sharing about who we are as a collective. But if we separate ourselves by them and us, and it's true, a lot of us, we're out in the community, we're doing what we do, but then we go back to our reality.
Hmm.
And does our reality reflect the work that we're doing? And that takes work. And there is something uncomfortable about engaging with community on a personal level that you haven't done before.
Hmm.
And being able to speak about that. And I think, particularly in areas where we have an opportunity to engage daily with different communities, it's okay to go off record and say, what do you think about this? And how can you help me? One of the things that happened when I came to the Y, they put me in a role working with senior citizens, and of which I am one, so I say that proudly. Um, but my background is in youth development.
Mm.
I've worked with kids my 80% of my career, and so I was kind of flabbergasted. And I'm like, why are you putting me with seniors? And they said, trust me, what you did with young people will definitely apply to our older population. And they were right. They're stubborn. They won't do what I tell them to do. They tell me what to do. So you got to approach it a little differently.
Hmm.
But what I found from them is that even though we are in the same age group, they were teaching me. They were teaching me about the community that they live in, because I had one person tell me, what do you know about North Minneapolis? You live out there with white people. I'm like, okay, let's be clear. I've been working in Minneapolis since I've been here. That's number one. Number two, I grew up in Newark. I lived in the projects. So don't just throw my experience away. And three, what do I know? I come here to listen. I don't come in here to tell you what to do. I want to hear from you. And so being able to push back in a kind way, but
Hmm.
not let people say to you, and this has happened in interviews, that what you've experienced doesn't matter because it doesn't reflect who you are now. You don't know anything about me. And until you do, you don't know if it reflects me or not.
Mm.
And so being comfortable to push back, but with that Minnesota nice, that's where the uncomfortable conversation comes in. Well, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't look at it that way. It's, you're speaking your truth and you can do it in a compassionate way, but you need to speak your truth. That's the only way other people will learn.
Yeah, it's a mindset switch because, like you
Mm,
said, confrontation. Um, we may view it as confrontation, but really it's a learning opportunity. And
yeah,
if you kind of go into it that way, we all have good intentions here. We're all trying to be better.
right.
that might be a better understanding, instead of thinking they're going to tell me I'm a bad person, or they're going to tell me I did this or that or whatever, whatever that mindset is.
Yeah, when I coach directors and managers, I always tell them, when you're sitting down getting ready to have a difficult conversation with one of your direct reports, one of the things that can be very helpful to them is when they're looking at the work that you are now critiquing, for lack of a better word, don't go into it with a deficit mindset. Go into it with the attitude of, okay, what's good here? What can be different here? And how can I support you to get to that point? When you go in with a deficit mindset, that permeates within your team. And then your team has a deficit mindset. I can't do this, I'm not qualified. And so then you got to work through those issues. Go in being positive, being supportive, and you then become the coach, because that's the way teams survive. I mean, being an old football coach, it's like, even though I believe defense wins games, we have to do it together. And if we're not one team, something is going to lack. And so someone's got to pick it up. So we're all in this together. And, some of my directors just look at me and shake their heads that, yeah, it's football season. But it's true. And you see, and yes, it is football season, but it is true in how we approach our work, how we work with each other, and how we start to change a culture of you and them. It then becomes us as a collective.
That's great. And you coached football?
Oh, yeah. You didn't know that?
I didn't.
Your wife did not tell you this? I was defensive coordinator for 6 years for my son, through VAA, Valley Athletic Association. And then when they got to middle school, the teachers took over. But if you'd ever come to a Valley Middle football game, JV, I was the one standing on the sidelines with the defensive coordinator, providing my very helpful input. And then when he got to college, the head coach of his college team at Carleton would have me sit in the third row on the 50-yard line, so that when a referee made an error in his call, he'd just turn around and look at me, and then I would stand up for the entire stadium to hear, do you understand what clipping is? Let me explain it to you. Do you need my glasses? I have the rule book here. And my poor son had to deal with that all 4 years, because he started all 4 years. That when he graduated from Carleton, the head of the athletic department had a video, and the head coach said, we're going to see some highlights of our seniors. And the first one he showed of my son tackling the quarterback from Bethel, and because he was a linebacker, and I taught him how to hit, threw the quarterback into a snowbank, and the only thing you hear is, that's my baby, yeah. And my poor son is like, oh God, I can't. I'm like, hey, you are my baby. But I've had fun with it. I live and breathe football. And one of the guys I coached at VAA was Trevor Laws. And Trevor Laws went to Notre Dame. I taught Trevor how to hit. I had him in the 4th grade. He was drafted 47th pick overall to the Philadelphia Eagles. I was at his draft party. And yeah.
That is amazing.
I love football.
Who's your favorite team?
Well, to be politically correct, I have to say the Vikings. But hey,
it's okay if you don't, because
they are.
It's a lifelong world of misery.
It is. But hey, I grew up in New York. I mean, I'm a Mets fan. I love my Giants. And after both teams just killed my heart this past weekend, I'm like, here we go. But I'm so glad it's back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also support the Giants, and I like Pittsburgh. I like a lot of different teams. And
That's
then,
great.
I got to support my sorry college, which is Rutgers, which when Kevin Warren went to be the head of the Big Ten, I called him and I said, listen, Kevin, if you could do one thing for me, and he's like, oh God, here it comes. What do you want, Kari? Can you get Rutgers out of the Big Ten? I don't know what brainchild that was of anybody's. Take us out. It's a bigger stage for us to embarrass ourselves on. Put us back in the Ivy League. We did so much better. He's like, yeah, I'll take that under advisement. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah, speaking of Kevin Warren, I'm sad that he left the Vikings.
I am
But
too.
I knew him very little, just a few times that I got to interview him. But every time, whether I interviewed him or he spoke, one of the kindest,
Yes.
but also he drops truth bombs
Oh,
all over the place.
unbelievable. Yes.
What?
Yeah.
Let me say that again. I got to write that down. I mean, he's just
Absolutely.
amazing.
Oh, I adored him. And every time I got a chance to be in his space, there was one corporate meeting I was at, and he was the speaker, and I was sitting in the back, and he saw me, and he always made an effort to come over and give me a big bear hug. And he's like, "Are you, are you tracking me?" Or I'm like, "Of course I am." I loved hearing
Yeah.
him speak and the stories he had of growing up and what he went through, and he's just so inspirational.
Hmm.
So I really enjoy him, and I miss him being in the Twin Cities.